Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. I'm Robert Petito, and in this video, we're gonna wrap up our Monetize Your Glide app series. If you've been tracking along, in the first video, we decided which content we wanted to put behind the paywall, and then set up the conditions and user experience in order to provide that content when a user has paid. In the second video, we set up our payment link through Payhere, which talks to Stripe, and then embedded that payment link using a web embed component into our Glide app. If you haven't watched those two videos, stop what you're doing, pause this video, and check the links in the description below so you can catch yourself up before continuing. So in this third video, we're going to create the automation necessary so that whenever a user makes a payment or updates their subscription, their account inside of our app will automatically be updated. In order to make this automation, we're going to use a platform called Make. So to get started, we're going to head over to make.com and sign in. If you haven't yet created a make.com account, you can click right over here or in the link in the description below to get started. Now, I already have a make.com account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to sign in with Google. Upon signing into Make here, you'll land on your dashboard. Here's where you can see an overview of all the different scenarios that you've created. A scenario is basically an end-to-end automation. It starts with a trigger happening in one app, and it could follow an action sequence until you have some sort of action happening in some other app. In our use case, what we want to have happen is that whenever a payment is made in Payhere, then we want something to happen in Glide, and that something is going to be updating the user account. To create a new scenario, we'll hit the purple Create a New Scenario button in the top right corner. To start off your scenario, we have to create a trigger. This is going to be the app that's causing our action sequence. In this case, it's going to be whenever a payment is made in Payhere. So Payhere is going to be our trigger. Often in Make, you can simply search for that app and add it to your trigger step. So if I search for Payhere, we see that Make doesn't actually have that integration. So what we'll need to do instead is create a generic webhook. So I'm going to go ahead and click on webhooks, or you can search for webhooks. And it's going to be a custom webhook. And we're going to add a new webhook here. And we can call it New Payment in Payhere. We'll go ahead and save. And this is our webhook URL. We're going to copy this address to our clipboard. And we have to paste this URL in the webhook section of our payment link. So we're going to head back to Payhere, head over to our Payment Links tab, find our donation link, head to Advanced, scroll down, and paste in that webhook URL. Make sure you save your changes. And now our payment link knows that whenever it gets activated, whether it's through a new payment or a recurring payment, it's going to call up our Make scenario in order to continue on with the automation. Now, one thing to know is that Payhere has 4 separate event types, and those different event types get called whenever something happens in Payhere. Those 4 event types are when a subscription gets created, when a subscription gets canceled, when there's a successful payment, or if there's a failed payment. And so what we need to do is catch those different event types as they happen. Whenever a user creates a new subscription in Payhere, 2 different event types get called: the subscription creation and the payment success, hopefully. And there's no way to know which one comes first. So we have to account for the fact that they might come in with the subscription first and then the payment, or maybe the payment will process first and then the subscription will follow. And so we're going to create a scenario that routes the automation through an action sequence based upon what type of event is coming in to our Make scenario. In order to make that route, we're actually going to use a Make router. So in the Tools section at the bottom, we're going to add a router. We're going to connect our router to our webhook. And from our router, we're going to add a new path. Now, ultimately, we want to edit the user profile row of our Glide app. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new app to our scenario. And I'm going to search for Glide. And you'll see that Glide has a brand new Make module that just came out in 2024. I'm going to go ahead and click on Glide. And of these actions, we want to select Edit Row because we want to edit the user profile row in order to update the payment and subscription information. So I'll select Edit Row. I'm going to go ahead and connect it to our router. We'll delete this empty module over here. And let's first configure our edit payment information. So I'm going to click on Edit Row. And if you don't already have a Glide connection, you're going to have to add a new Glide connection and enter an API key. This API key can be found in the settings portion of your app. Just so you see where to go, I'm going to head over to my app, head to Settings. Within Settings, select Integrations, and scroll down till you find Make. It's in alphabetical order, and you're going to add Make to your app. From here, you can simply just copy the API key to your clipboard. Back in Make, we'll go ahead and paste in that API key and hit Save. Each team folder in your Glide account has a separate API key. So you'll need to repeat this process if you are setting up automations in different team folders in your own Glide account. So you can see here that I've connected my unroped apps team folder, and now I can select any app within inside of that folder. And in this case, we're going to set up our Payhere app. Next, it's asking for which table contains the record that we want to update. In our case, it's the user profile table. So I'll select users. And now it's asking for the row ID that needs to be updated. We're going to find this information baked into our Payhere webhook. If you remember, we're passing along the user ID as a custom field whenever a user pays or renews their subscription. So we'll be able to tap into that custom field in order to select the row ID. We can't do that yet. We'll have to do that in just a second. But as you scroll down here, we see that we have our subscription information as well as our payment information that we're going to set up. Now, to actually enter in these values, we have to run our webhook, which means we actually have to make a payment in order to capture the different fields coming in. We'll do that in just a second. For now, we're going to head up to the top. I'm going to put something bogus in for the row ID and then hit OK. We'll come back to this in a bit. Let's go ahead and save our work. I'm going to rename our make scenario to Payhere to Glide, and then save at the bottom. Let's go ahead and set up our webhook. To do this, I'm going to hit run once at the bottom. And now this scenario is waiting for a payment to come through. We actually have to make a single payment in order to trigger this scenario in order to set up the rest of our app. So I'm going to head over to our app, go to our data section, and I'm going to find the Payhere link that we created, copy it, go to a new tab, and paste. Now I've set up my donation link to only be $1 a month for testing purposes. If you've set your dollar amount to be something higher, maybe you're like $40 a month, just know you can come over here to the URL and find where you see amount in cents and change it from whatever price that you've set to 100, which is $1. And then if you hit enter, you'll see an updated payment link that you can use for testing purposes. What's nice is that because we're copying it from Glide, it's automatically filled in our customer details, and it should have already have that user ID in the background as well that we're going to need in order to set up the rest of our scenario. I'm going to go through and pay. And now that our payment's gone through, we can head back over to Make and see whether or not our action was triggered. And it looks like it was. As you can see in our webhook, we had one successful run, and you hit follow this path here to edit this bogus row. Diving into this one, you can see that the event was payment success. So in this case, the payment processing came first, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it might be the subscription created that comes first. So because we have the payment success one that came in first, let's set that one up first in our edit row. So I'm going to come over here to our Glide module. So now that we've actually triggered that webhook, we see all of this great information that we can add to our user table. So we're going to hone in on the payment portion of this webhook because that's the portion that we're setting up here with the payment.success. When we go to set up our subscription created event, we'll point to our subscription portion here. Okay, so under payment, we want the row ID. The row ID, again, can be found under the custom fields, user ID. If you don't see user ID here, that means that you might have a typo in your Payhere link where you have your custom field set up. So here we have custom _ field _ user ID. Make sure that this matches exactly what you've put in your Payhere. But anyway, back in Make, we see that it came through successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as our row ID. Next, we're going to head scroll down and we're going to find our payment information. So we're going to update our payment status to be the payment status. In this case, it returned a success status. Our payment amount, if you wanted to keep track of that, we could just use the amount or we can use the formatted amount. It's completely up to you. The last paid at is going to be our payment updated at field. And our next payment at, I believe, is actually under the subscription. So under subscription, we see next charge at. So I'm going to go ahead and rename that in our Glide app to point to subscription rather than payment. And the reason why that field is under subscription is because it's in the subscription event that it knows what the interval is. In this case, our billing interval is monthly. So it knows as part of the subscription when the next charge is going to occur. So in terms of payment, we're set up. So I'm going to hit OK. And now this module should be called whenever the payment.success comes through. So we're going to set up a filter on this path by clicking on the wrench. And we can label this payment. And the condition is going to be when the event is equal to payment.success. Make sure you type it exactly, lowercase and everything, so it matches the event here. And then hit OK. So the next step is to set up our subscription fields. So what I'm going to do is actually just clone this payment module, drag it down to this path of our router. We'll delete this empty field here. And we're going to set up a filter called subscription. And the condition here is where event contains, I'm going to say case insensitive, subscription. And this will actually catch not only the subscription created, but also if the subscription is canceled. So what we want to have happen is that if the subscription is created or canceled, to update the status and the date as to when that occurred. All right, so we'll hit OK. And now let's change the fields of our Glide edit row here to look at the subscription portion of our user table. We're going to leave the row ID alone. We see that the app and the table have already been pulled over from the copy. Scrolling down, we're going to remove these payment information because we're no longer editing payment fields. Instead, we're going to update subscription fields. So the subscription status, okay, should be here under subscription status. Subscription ID will be over here. Subscription created at will be created at here. Now the subscription plan, we didn't really set up in our Glide app, but this is useful if you wanted to set up like different tiers of subscriptions. For example, like a gold plan or a silver plan or a platinum plan. You can pass that information through a custom field as well. So that way you know which plan the user has subscribed to. And then that way you can provide them levels of access based upon that field. For now, we can leave that blank. If you want to, we can throw a plan ID in there. It really doesn't matter. And then we're going to scroll down. And again, the next payment at is actually going to be inside of the subscription under this next charge at. All right, we're going to say OK. All right, let's go ahead and save. And now we're going to hit run once again. And when we hit run once, we should see that the subscription portion comes through. And it should hit our second path of our scenario. So run once. We're going to use existing data because our module is waiting for that subscription.created to come through. So there's the one. We see that it followed the second path successfully. And it looks like we have an error. Let's figure out where this error is coming. So it didn't find the user ID in our payment.custom fields. Okay, so we probably should have pointed it to subscription.custom fields. So I'm going to scroll down and under the subscription portion, head to custom fields and then user ID. So yeah, it's probably better to just make sure that because we're under the subscription created subscription created event now, that we're just leveraging all the subscription portion of this event. All right, we'll hit OK, run once, use existing data. Let's see if it goes through. Yeah, there we go. So now it went through, it found it. And it should have updated all of our fields in our user profile. Let's go ahead and verify that. And scrolling over, it looks like everything came through. Look at that. Subscription is active. The created at is now. Last paid at was now. Captured the amount. And the next payment is 1 month later because we're on a monthly subscription. So now that it looks like our automation worked correctly, we're going to head over to Make, save it one more time, and we're going to turn scheduling on. And so now whenever there's a new payment or recurring subscription payment that goes through, it's going to automatically run these scenarios behind the scenes and update our Glide app in real time. What's also cool is that this scenario will run whenever a user cancels their subscription. So back in our app, if you remember, if we head over to our user profile, so that when they click on Manage Subscription, they get taken to the Payhere portal. And if they cancel their subscription through that portal, it will trigger this webhook. It'll see that the event is subscription canceled. It'll head down this second path and update our user profile to cancel their subscription in our app as well. Now, this make scenario is if we're offering subscriptions as our monetization. If we're doing one-off payments instead, this scenario is actually much easier. Let's go back a screen, clone the one we just created, and we'll rename this to Payhere one-off to Glide. We have to create a new webhook for this, so we'll just say add and call it Payhere one-off, save. We'll copy address to the clipboard and then save. We're going to delete our subscription branch. We can actually delete the router then too, and just link our Glide module directly to our webhook. Let's clean it up a bit. We can remove the filter. And the last thing we have to do is just make sure that our Glide app and our Payhere link are referencing this webhook and that we're passing along the correct information. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to Payhere. We're going to find our one-off payment link, head to our Custom Fields tab, and we see that we're passing the user ID, but we're also going to make sure that we want to pass along the content ID as well. So we're going to create a new field. We'll choose text, and we'll call this content ID. Again, all one word, and we'll hide it. And before we save changes, we're going to head to our Advanced tab, scroll down, and in the webhook URL, paste in the webhook that we just copied from our make scenario. We'll hit save. And now we have to head over to Glide to make sure that that content ID parameter is being passed along in our construct URL column. So back in our app, we're going to head to our content, find our payment link. Let's edit it. Right, so we're passing along the custom field user ID, but we're not passing the custom field content ID. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to add a new parameter. We'll paste. And instead of user ID, we'll say content ID. And we'll choose the row ID of the content. And we'll save. So ultimately, we're going to pass along this row ID whenever a new payment is made, and this row ID is going to end up in our payments table as the content ID. So now we're going to go ahead and configure that automation in Make. Before we do, we're going to head back to our content table and copy one of the payment links here. All right, let's head over to Make. In this case, we don't want to edit a row, but rather we want to add a new row. So we're going to delete this edit row. And we're going to add from Glide our add row action and connect that to our webhook. We have to go through the setup of making sure our connection is chosen, finding our app again, selecting the table that we want to add to. In this case, it's not the users table, but rather the payments table. And then we need to pass in the email, timestamp, content ID, and amount of our webhook. Open a new tab. Paste in that URL that we found in the Glide app. and make a new payment for that content. So we want to make sure that the content ID comes through. We have to make sure the amount that we're paying is at least $1, otherwise the action won't be triggered. So I'm going to come over here to my URL and change the amount in cents to 100. When I hit enter, we should see that the payment gets updated here. I'm going to go ahead and make a payment. And now that the payment's gone through, I'm going to head back to make. I'm going to hit run once. We'll select use existing data. And we should find that there's a new payment success. And underneath that payment, we should see that on the custom fields, we have the user ID and the content ID. And now we can select these fields when setting up the add to row glide module. So the very last thing we have to do here is just entering that information. So the email address is what we're capturing. This could have easily been user ID from the custom fields here as well. So if you're using user ID, you'll find that under the custom fields portion. But for me, I'm using email, so I'll just choose the email under the customer portion. Timestamp can just be the now variable. You can find that in the calendar option at the top. So I'll choose calendar and then now. Content ID is going to be again in our custom fields content ID. And the amount will be under the payment amount. Hit OK. And then save. And now we know that every time a customer pays for new content, it's going to hit the webhook. It's then going to add that row to glide. And because of the logic we set up in our first video, they'll gain access to that content. Last thing we have to do here is just turn on scheduling, hit save, and we're good to go. So congratulations, you've made it through all 3 videos of this series. Now you can monetize your Glide app with subscriptions and one-off payments. If you have any questions at all or need specific guidance, feel free to reach out to me in the Glide community forums. You can also find me at X @rpetito. And as always, thanks for watching.